The rain hadn't stopped for days. Gray clouds hung low over the small town, and the cold wind cut through the cracked windows of a one-room apartment where Ethan Miller, a 24-year-old student, sat huddled over his books. His hands trembled not from fear but from exhaustion. Tuition was due, rent was overdue, and the landlord's threats had turned into eviction notices taped on the door. Outside, laughter drifted through the thin walls, the kind that came from people who didn't have to worry about dinner or deadlines. Ethan's eyes burned as he stared at his reflection in the rain-streaked window. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. Life had just been unkind. Every morning he worked at a diner washing dishes. Every night he studied economics, the irony not lost on him. He was learning about wealth while counting coins to survive. But that night fate decided to write a new chapter. It happened at the library. Ethan often escaped there for warmth, pretending to read while secretly napping between the shelves. That's where he first met Margaret Hayes, a 69-year-old woman with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a quiet smile. She wore pearls that looked older than the building itself, yet her presence was gentle, almost lonely. She had dropped a stack of books, and Ethan rushed to help. "Thank you, young man," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "You remind me of someone I used to know." From that day on, their paths crossed more often. She'd ask about his studies, his dreams, his worries. Ethan thought she was just a kind old lady, maybe too kind. He didn't know she was one of the town's wealthiest women, a widow whose name quietly sat on every charity plaque and university wing. Over coffee one evening, Margaret asked, "Ethan, do you believe love can exist between two people who are decades apart?" He hesitated, unsure whether she was joking. "I think love is about souls, not years," he replied. She smiled, that same mysterious smile she always carried, and changed the subject. A week later, news spread like wildfire. Ethan Miller had married Margaret Hayes. The town exploded with gossip. Laughter filled coffee shops, whispers echoed through college halls, and the diner he once worked in became a stage for mockery. "Guess he found the fastest way out of poverty," one coworker sneered. "Imagine. Kissing wrinkles for rent money," another joked. Ethan heard it all and every cruel word. But he stayed silent, holding Margaret's fragile hand as she smiled through the noise, because deep down he knew something they didn't. Something that would silence them all. Soon the wedding was quiet, too quiet. No grand ballroom, no orchestra, no family cheering in the aisles. Just a handful of witnesses, the scent of lilies, and two souls standing before each other with reasons the world would never understand. Ethan wore a borrowed suit, the same one he'd worn to his college interview years ago. Margaret, elegant as ever, looked serene under the soft glow of the church lights. Her eyes glimmered, not with vanity but with peace, as if she knew something everyone else didn't. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, there was polite applause, followed by the buzzing of phones and camera flashes outside. Within hours, the gossip spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? That broke college kid married the old widow. She's 70. What could they even talk about? He must be after her fortune." The town was merciless. Even Ethan's classmates whispered behind his back, calling him Mr. Gold Digger. At the diner, customers smirked when he walked in. Strangers laughed at him online, but Ethan said nothing. He stood beside Margaret, calm and unmoved even as the world pointed fingers. The first night in Margaret's grand mansion felt unreal. Chandeliers glittered above velvet furniture, and paintings worth more than his entire life stared down at him. He walked through long, echoing halls filled with memories he didn't belong to. Margaret noticed his unease. "You're wondering why I brought you here," she said, smiling faintly. "People see my money and think that's all I am. But what I wanted was someone who still believes in people." Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. "You didn't have to marry me for that." She chuckled softly. "Maybe I did." For the next few days, life became strangely peaceful. They shared meals in the sunroom, talked about books, and watched the rain together. Margaret told stories of her late husband, a man who built empires but forgot to build memories. She spoke of regret and loneliness, of wanting to leave the world with something more meaningful than money, and Ethan listened. Not for profit, not for gain, but because her words felt like a mirror of his own fears. One night, as thunder rumbled outside, Ethan found Margaret sitting by the fire, staring at an old photograph. "You remind me of him," she whispered. The kindness in your eyes. He lost that somewhere along the way. Then she turned to him and said something that froze him completely. Ethan, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll keep believing, even if everyone else stops. He frowned. What do you mean? She only smiled, her eyes distant and sad. You'll understand soon enough. Outside, the storm grew louder. Inside, so did Ethan's unease. Something about her tone felt final, like a goodbye, hidden in a blessing. And he couldn't shake the feeling that the laughter outside was about to turn into silence inside these walls. The following morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. The maids walked softly, whispering under their breath. Margaret, who usually greeted Ethan with a warm smile at breakfast, didn't come downstairs. Ethan knocked gently on her door. Margaret? It's me. No answer. He entered slowly, heart pounding. The curtains were still drawn, and the pale light of dawn painted the room in silver shadows. Margaret lay in bed, her breathing shallow but steady. A half-finished letter sat on her desk beside a cup of cold tea. He hurried to her side. Are you okay? Her eyes opened, faintly smiling. Just tired, she whispered. The rain makes me remember too much. Ethan sat with her all morning, reading aloud from her favorite novel. Between passages, she would close her eyes and hum softly, as if trying to hold on to something invisible. By afternoon, she had fallen asleep again. Ethan stepped outside for air, unaware that this day would mark the beginning of something far greater than anyone could imagine. The gossip outside the mansion only grew louder. News outlets had picked up the story. Young man marries elderly millionaire widow. Headlines mocked him, memes circulated online, and even the diner where he once worked had put up a sarcastic sign. Looking for love? Ask Ethan how. It would have broken anyone else. But Ethan didn't care anymore. He'd seen the truth. The loneliness in Margaret's eyes, the kindness that money couldn't buy. Still, something about her recent behavior troubled him. She seemed weaker, distracted, almost as if she was preparing for something unseen. On the 6th night, lightning cracked across the sky. Ethan couldn't sleep. He wandered into Margaret's study, a room filled with old photographs, faded letters, and trophies of a life fully lived. On her desk was a sealed envelope addressed to my husband. He hesitated, tempted to open it, but his conscience stopped him. Instead, he placed it back and noticed another document beneath it. A handwritten note labeled "For delivery, 7 days after the wedding." His heart raced. Why 7 days? Before he could think further, he heard footsteps behind him. It was Margaret standing in her robe, frail yet dignified. Curiosity can be dangerous, Ethan, she said gently. He turned, embarrassed. I'm sorry, I know, she interrupted. You have a good heart, but some truths only reveal themselves in time. She walked closer, her voice trembling. Do you believe in fate, Ethan? He nodded slowly. Then believe me when I say, everything happening now is exactly as it should be. Her words lingered in the silence like the echo of a secret. That night, Ethan dreamt of her voice calling his name. Soft, distant, almost angelic. When morning came, the sun finally broke through the storm clouds, but Margaret did not wake up. The mansion felt emptier than ever. Morning sunlight poured through the lace curtains, touching everything except the one thing that had gone cold. Margaret Hayes's hand. Ethan sat beside her bed, silent, his fingers trembling as he held hers. The doctor had already come and gone. It was peaceful, the nurse whispered. She must have drifted away in her sleep, peaceful. The word echoed in his head like a cruel joke. Nothing about this felt peaceful. In just 7 days, his life had changed, not with laughter, not with wealth, but with a silence so heavy it pressed against his chest. Later that afternoon, the housekeeper approached him quietly, holding a sealed envelope. She left this for you, sir. Said it should be delivered on the 7th day of your marriage. Ethan froze. He recognized the handwriting instantly, elegant, deliberate, the same as the note he had seen in her study. His name was written in gold ink across the front. To my husband. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter folded neatly, carrying the faint scent of lavender. My dear Ethan, if you are reading this, it means my time has come. Don't grieve me. My soul has long been tired, but your kindness gave me peace in my final days. You reminded me what it means to be seen, not for wealth, but for who I am. The world mocked you, but I knew your heart. And that is why I chose you, not as a husband of convenience, but as a bridge between my past regrets and the future I wanted to build. In the study, there is a red folder with your name on it. Inside are the documents for something I started long ago, a foundation for students like you who dream beyond their means. It's yours now. Not my money, but my mission. Take it and build what I could not. Love isn't measured by years, Ethan. It's measured by moments that change us forever, with all my heart. Margaret. Tears blurred his vision. He sat there, the letter trembling in his hands, realizing she had known all along, the whispers, the judgment, the cruelty. And still, she had smiled through it. He ran to her study and found the red folder. Inside were legal papers transferring ownership of the Hayes Hope Foundation, a charity for struggling students, funded with millions. His name was printed as the new director. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The woman everyone mocked had just entrusted him with a legacy of kindness. He sank to the floor, the weight of her love crushing and healing him all at once. Outside, the rain had stopped. The town that once laughed was silent now, though they didn't yet know why, because soon the truth would reach them. And it would change everything. The morning of the funeral arrived with a stillness that felt sacred. The sky was pale, and the air carried that strange quiet that follows after a storm, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan stood in front of Margaret's portrait, framed with white lilies. Her smile, eternal and soft, watched over the rows of people who had once laughed at her name. Reporters stood outside the gates waiting for a scandal. Neighbors whispered among themselves, expecting drama, expecting proof of greed. But what they found instead was truth. The lawyer stepped forward after the ceremony. His voice was calm, measured. Before her passing, Mrs. Margaret Hayes left a public statement to be read today. He unfolded the paper, and the courtyard fell silent. To those who mocked what you did not understand, the letter began, I forgive you. Love does not need your approval to exist. The man you called a gold digger was the first person to speak to me like I was human. Not a headline, not a wallet. He gave me peace when I had none left, so I leave him not my fortune, but my purpose. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked. The lawyer continued reading, announcing that Ethan Miller was now the founder and trustee of the Hayes Hope Foundation, a multi-million-dollar initiative to fund education for underprivileged youth. Every person who had laughed felt the weight of their own silence. Days turned into weeks. Ethan didn't buy a mansion or new clothes. Instead, he poured every ounce of his heart into the foundation. He hired struggling students, rebuilt schools, and set up free scholarships under Margaret's name. Her photo hung on every office wall beneath a quote she once told him, "Kindness is wealth the world can't steal." One afternoon, while speaking at a university ceremony, Ethan looked out at hundreds of students whose lives were about to change, just as his had. His voice trembled, but his message was clear. To everyone who ever felt small or invisible, he said, remember this. One act of love can echo louder than a lifetime of judgment. Mrs. Hayes taught me that. Applause filled the hall, and for the first time in months, Ethan smiled without pain. That night, as he walked past the old mansion, he glanced up at the window where Margaret used to sit. The curtains moved slightly as though stirred by a gentle wind or perhaps by something unseen. He whispered, I kept my promise. The stars above shimmered softly, as if answering back. And the people who once laughed at him? They no longer spoke his name with mockery, only reverence. Because when the truth finally came to light, every voice that once ridiculed him fell silent.